Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How you all doing out there, gang? I've got a great guest for you today. I've got Ramesh, the co-founder and CEO at a company called Proceemo on the show. Proceemo delivers simplified and multi-cloud infrastructure for distributed enterprise cloud journeys. What does that mean? Well, essentially companies innovate faster and remain in control with that integrated stack. And that stack combines cloud networking, performance, security, observability, and cost management, which is all powered by data insights and machine learning models with autonomous cloud networking, which ultimately reduces complexity and risk. And why is that a big deal? Well, cloud-forward enterprises, including Fortune 100 companies, have adopted Proceemo to successfully roll out revenue-generating applications that improve operational efficiency and accelerate positive business outcomes. And they do all that from sunny California. So today, though, I've invited them on here to share their origin story, and we're also going to dig a little bit deeper into recent research commissioned by Proceemo, which found that traditional networking actually impedes that multi-cloud journey that so many businesses are on right now. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Ramesh is waiting to share his story and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show here, Neil. I'm Ramesh Prabagaran, CEO of Proceemo. This is my second startup, which essentially tells you I am crazier than what most people think to be doing this all over again. But as a CEO, my job is to make sure that we have a rock star team focus on the mission, strategy, and importantly, the metrics as well. And this is a tech company and lots of fun dealing with cloud.
You said there this is your second startup, so there's got to be an origin story there. So I'm curious, what was it that lit that spark in you and your passion for tech? Where did all that come from, and what was it that put you on this path you find yourself today?
Yeah, you always look back and then you try to figure out if there is a line you can draw from where you started to where you have been. Might not be a straight line. In many cases, it's actually a zigzag. In some cases, it might even have like a pause in between. But I think there's one common thread that I see all the way from kind of probably going back 20 years to now. Is just the origin of networking. So I grew up, I'm probably going to expose my age as a result of all this, but I grew up when we had dial-up. And there was a time when, based on the nice dial tone that you see in the dial-up, you know what kind of speed you're going to get on the other end. And we've gone from there to now kind of ubiquitous access to anything, anywhere, and so forth. And I've always been fascinated by that. So all through kind of my school, my initial job stints and whatnot have all been focused on networking. And that's, again, what led me and importantly, the team that I work with as well to the first startup. And the first startup was kind of this rave towards kind of commoditizing a whole bunch of things that were happening in the wide area network. It was a lot of fun. And that was Viptela. We got started back in 2012 and literally 3 people in a garage and kind of sold that to Cisco 5 years in, really good exit. And then after 18 months or so decided, hey, fun of a startup is just too much. And so I want to jump back in. And so a few of us jumped back in and having a lot of fun again.
Oh, I think me and you are going to get on just fine, because usually when I say to people, do you ever miss the sound of a US 56K robotics modem connecting? Do you miss that? Usually they look at me like I'm crazy, but you sound like the kind of guy that gets it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there really was a time when you could, like, just based on the dial tone, figure out whether you're going to get 56 or 112 or 76, right? Like,
I'm so glad you said that. I used to think as well. You could tell just that opening connection. You know exactly where you were going with it. Oh man, happy days. But of course, that path did lead you to Proceemo, a venture-backed company on a mission to disrupt enterprise infrastructure. So, for people hearing about you guys for the first time, can you set the scene and tell me more about what it is and the kind of problems that you set out to solve with tech?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are in the multi-cloud networking space. And for those listeners that are kind of new to this and the terminology there, think of, provide a simple example. It's think of it as like a software or a set of capabilities that sit in between two things. Those two things can be a user trying to access an application or another application trying to access another application, all sitting within the cloud. Let's see if we can kind of make this a little bit clearer. I'm going to take a retail example here. So let's say I am the person and I want to buy a pair of jeans. Now, the application that I'm interacting with on my web browser, let's say, is sitting all the way in your region, Neil, let's say in London or in the UK region somewhere, and I'm here sitting in sunny California. And so there's like a whole bunch of things in between me sitting here and the application sitting in the UK region that needs to work properly for me to be able to interact and get the appropriate experience. And that's just looking at it from kind of a user accessing a certain application. The same is true for the application I'm talking to. So let's say I need to buy not one, but two pairs of jeans, and something in that application needs to go check if I can really purchase two pairs of jeans. And so that app is going to talk to another application to figure out, hey, is this allowed? And can this person really buy two? And so forth, right? And so what we provide is essentially a piece of software that sits in the cloud, sitting in front of the nice, wonderful application that's going to allow me to buy a pair of jeans, that takes care of delivering the appropriate experience for this particular application, along with all the security and, importantly, the IT team that's operationalizing this particular application should not have a headache in trying to do this, right? And so operating in the cloud, for those that are savvy, they know what it takes. And if you have many such applications, it gets complex very quickly. We actually help simplify multi-cloud networking and ensure that users get the right level of experience and applications get the right level of security and so forth. That in a nutshell is what we do.
That's a great way of explaining it. All I would say on that is I think I need the two pair of jeans here in cold UK. You're in sunny California. You can have two pairs of shorts instead, right?
Absolutely.
But can you tell me a bit more about how you reimagined architecture and how it actually provides users in multiple industries with fast and secure experiences for all enterprise applications across a wide range of environments? Because I think it's what makes you guys stand out a little bit, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you look at it from the standpoint of an enterprise, they have a few interesting challenges to deal with, right? So they have some applications that are in Amazon Web Services, AWS, some in maybe Azure, some sprinkled maybe between AWS, Azure, and Google, and such like. And the reasons could be multiple. Maybe they've acquired a company, they have maybe some services that work better on one cloud versus the other, and so forth. But for a variety of reasons, enterprise find themselves operating in predominantly one cloud with also having some sprinkles of applications across multiple clouds. Now, the traditional way to essentially take care of multi-cloud networking has been to just focus on connectivity, as in, is an application in one cloud able to talk to another cloud? And if that happens, people declare victory and then go for it. And the same is true for users accessing applications. Is the user able to access the application? If yes, then great, wonderful, open a bottle of champagne and then go for it. The real challenge happens after that, which is once you start to host this particular application in the public cloud, once this application starts to grow a little bit complex, multiple people want to access it. Maybe this is a really good retail application and this jeans is like really popular and everybody in the world want to access it. And now suddenly you have requests coming in from all nook and corners of the world. How do you provide the right level of experience and the right level of security for these type of transactions. And then importantly, when the application grows and when the presence of this particular application grows, you start to then take a copy of this, move that into a different region. Maybe I want to serve the European market very differently than the American market, very differently than, let's say, the Asian market. Right? And so I start to then make things a little more complex from the application side for all the right reasons, because I want to deal with these things differently. And so traditionally, the focus has been connect to the cloud or connect within the cloud. And what enterprises are noticing is that solves maybe a quarter of the problem. The real challenge comes after that, which is when I have what is called as day two operations, which is somebody sipping a nice cup of coffee, thinking everything is just working fine, and they are in, let's say, their cloud operations team, and suddenly something breaks. Breaks here being maybe a region from the US, let's say the whole of California, is not able to order those pairs of jeans. Now, how do you start to figure out where the problem is? Because it seems like the UK folks are just able to order the pair of jeans just fine. And so how do I figure out where the problem is, which part of the cloud is having a problem? And it all boils down to kind of getting a lot of rich visibility from the underlying infrastructure in order to make some really high quality decisions. And traditionally, if you focus on just connecting to the cloud, it will give you a binary 0 or 1 or a yes or no answer. Am I able to connect to the cloud or am I not able to? But the answer is not that. The answer is anywhere in between. We all interact with applications today where it's one part of the application is fine, but another part of the application is throwing a problem. And so you cannot deal with things anymore as simple yes or no. You need to understand what is inside of these applications and be able to not just connect, but also provide the experience and the security and everything related to it. And so what we have done essentially is we've been inspired, I would say, by how some of these really large Web 2.0, Web 3.0 type companies do and build applications in the public cloud. So if you take like a Netflix or an Airbnb or any of the Office 365 and so forth, the way they build application is very different than how enterprises build applications. So we were inspired by essentially these large, massive applications that work really, really well in the public cloud. And what we have done is we have taken the underlying capabilities that these guys have used, and we have incorporated that into our platform. And we deliver this back to the enterprise to say, you don't worry about anything in the cloud. Just focus on building your application. Everything sitting in front of it to deliver this at global scale, talk to other applications and so forth are all handled by our platform. So that's really the simplicity that we offer. Now, there have been decades of innovation in this underlying infrastructure stack, focused on connectivity, focused on experience, focused on visibility, secure access, performance, and so forth. And what we have seen is that for public cloud, you need to rethink this. You can't think of them as silos. You need to rethink them, put them together, and that's really what we have done. So in some ways, I would say what we have done kind of stuff that have been inspired by some of these large mega scale companies. But at the same time, we have packaged this and we have provided this back to the enterprise so that they can achieve the simplicity that's needed.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a little bit of research to try and find if there was anything quite topical that we could talk about. And literally immediately before we started recording today, I was reading about some new research commissioned by Proceemo, which found that traditional networking impedes multi-cloud journey. So one of the stats that really stood out in that research was 53% of enterprises that turn to traditional networking facing issues with operational complexity, security and performance that all stalls that multi-cloud journey. But can you share some insights around that? And did anything surprise you in that report?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And one of the fundamental things that we are able to do right now that we were not able to do even probably like 4 or 5 years ago is use the power of data, right? Like we all hear about machine learning and artificial intelligence and so forth. To me, those are all not just buzzwords, but they're kind of means to an end. They need to solve a problem. What is the problem that it needs to solve? is really one of complexity, right? So what we've been able to do really is leverage the power of the large hyperscalers. So AWS, Azure, GCP, they have massive presence. They can get very close to any user in the world within like 15, 20 milliseconds, right? And so they're literally at like everybody's doorstep and so forth. So we're able to leverage the investments that have been made into these large hyperscalers. Now, the investments made give you the capabilities, but it does not help you achieve the outcome. What enterprises care about is achieving outcomes. Can I reliably provide an application experience? So let's say you walk into one of the retail stores, pull up a kiosk or an iPad, and you want to order something. You need to make sure that that order goes through just fine. And so there's a certain level of reliability, availability, experience, performance, all that just needs to work the way it needs to. Now, to do that, you need to use the power of data, because that kiosk, let's say, if it's in California, works differently than if it is in the Midwest, than in UK versus in Asia somewhere, and so forth. So the underlying solution needs to understand how is the network behaving, and is it really providing on the experience required? Is it really helping achieve that simplicity and so forth, right? And so what we have seen, and this is where I think if you look at kind of our experience in the trenches working with these large enterprises over the last couple of decades, really come in because that's what these enterprises struggle with. They can move an application to the cloud, but are they able to achieve the outcomes? Not really. And so what we did is actually we took it upon ourselves to use the power of data. So we are able to use the underlying kind of insight coming from the platform. And the platform has a certain level of intelligence to crunch this data, compare that with what others are going through and so forth, and then make some really informed decisions, so that before a problem occurs, or if something is done suboptimally, the platform starts to recommend that you need to do things in a certain way. And so this is really tying everything back to kind of the statistics that you mentioned, which is almost half the number of enterprises today that care about anything more than just simple connectivity are not able to achieve it because they just don't have that level of visibility. And so the platform gives you the visibility, and at the same time, it gives the remediation associated with that as well. So it's able to auto-correct problems, it's able to fix things before they happen and so forth. So we've been, again, inspired by what Tesla has done with auto driving, what they call as autonomous. And so we've actually brought those autonomous capabilities to cloud networking. So our solution simply calls this autonomous multi-cloud networking, because we're able to utilize the underlying power of data in order to make some really high quality decisions automatically.
And for the techies listening, if we take a little peek under the hood or behind the curtain here, I believe everything that we've talked about so far is all powered by data insights, machine learning models, and that Proceemo application experience infrastructure platform. But can you expand a little on that and how it all comes together and how it's all powered by those things?
Absolutely. So let me take a couple of outcomes that customers care about, and then talk through that. So one is, let's say we take an example of experience for a certain application. And so I have created a nice, wonderful application, and I need to now suddenly launch this particular application and make sure that global users are able to access them just fine. Now, again, depending on which geography you are coming from, and which connection you're coming from, I could be coming in over a really high quality internet line from one location, and maybe a really crappy 3G connection from a different location. And so all of that has a material impact on what type of experience I can get for this particular application. And so the underlying platform is smart enough to understand what is really going through, and is able to utilize the power of data to automatically bring in the right set of capabilities to help achieve that outcome. Right? And so this is kind of looking at it from the lens of just experience, and very closely associated with that is also cost, because oftentimes what enterprises end up doing is they gold plate the entire infrastructure. So what they call as the requirements of the most stringent application becomes the requirement for basically all the applications. And so what you end up doing is you essentially gold plate or platinum plate the entire infrastructure. So something that really does not care about that level of performance, for example, ends up getting kind of the nice gold plated infrastructure. So first off the bat, right off the bat, you should be able to kind of delineate this and look at it from a different class of applications, right? And so each class of applications require different things from the underlying network, and so you need to be able to deal with that separately. So that's kind of one category of outcomes that we help achieve. Another category of outcomes, just to provide an example, is really around user experience or secure access. So if I am, let's say, accessing this from a certain application from my home, and then I frequently, let's say, go to one or two coffee shops and my office, the system starts to understand that this is Ramesh's behavior. And so it tries to understand and learn that. Now, if I suddenly come from a completely different location, let's say coming from UK, within 5 minutes, the system says, hey, you know what, this looks suspect. Let me make sure this is Ramesh, because like highly unlikely he can come from California and in 5 minutes later he can come from UK. Maybe it is a bad actor that's trying to do some malicious activity, or maybe it is really Ramesh, and let me authenticate and make sure that it is him, right? And so the system is able to utilize a variety of kind of quote unquote signals coming from multiple different sources, some coming from your machine that you're accessing this from, some coming from the cloud, some coming from the application and so forth, and then be able to correlate them to figure out, you know what, is this person legit? Does this person have the right level of credentials and access? And have they violated any kind of what I would call as normal behavior? And if so, then let me make sure, like we all are familiar with like one-time passwords and text messages that give you a code or some kind of an approval that you need to do with an authentication app. So we integrate with a variety of those to make sure that we provide those speed bumps, and only then you can access, right? And so those are, again, some of the outcomes that we help achieve. The problem is important to, why do we do this, right? I mean, if you have to ask yourself the question, why do you want to use ML or AI here and the power of data to solve this? Because it is a needle in a haystack problem. Typically, if you take a really large enterprise that has hundreds of thousands of users, maybe 2 or 3 out of them at any point of them look suspect. And how do you find those 2 or 3 out of a few 100,000? And so that becomes essentially a data problem, which then warrants using various modeling and algorithms in order to figure things out. That's kind of the geeky side of it, but happy to go through that with anybody listening and interested.
And I'm curious, though, how much of what you've created here was inspired by your extensive experience of you and your team solving those complex problems within IT infrastructure? So is Proceemo the result of your time spent in those trenches, or at least inspired by it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a nice saying that says you have to look at the past to understand the present, and only then you'll understand the future, right? And so anything kind of follows that curve. Where we've lived our lives dealing with various forms of networking challenges that enterprises have gone through, all the way from connecting kind of offices and buildings to kind of big hunking data centers, to how have they been able to architect their network for access to kind of popular applications, SaaS applications, new cloud-based applications, and so forth. And so that has given us quite a bit of knowledge/wisdom, I would say, to then bring into bear into Proceemo, so that we're able to now use those best practices and principles in order to architect a solution. So certain things like, for example, all of the recent data governance, data sovereignty type issues really come into the picture fairly quickly. The same is true for all of the break fix things that enterprises go through. So we have sat kind of shoulder to shoulder with the people in the operations centers trying to troubleshoot a problem at 2 a.m. And we have also sat shoulder to shoulder with execs trying to make a conscious and a cost-oriented call on what should my budget look like for next year. And so all of those are experiences that have gone into kind of building the company and building the platform, which ultimately is why we focus on outcomes. To us, whether you're an architect or an operations person or an IT exec trying to make a decision, ultimately your focus should be on outcomes, not kind of underlying capabilities. So for far too long, us included in the past have all focused on building capabilities, and we take pride in building those capabilities. But the real question to ask is, are those capabilities helping you achieve the outcome? And so we thought we can take a fresh start here with Proceemo, help you essentially achieve those outcomes.
And you're doing just that. You've been on an incredible journey. But the big question is, where do you go from here? And how will you continue to evolve and leverage emerging technologies and keep moving forward? Is there anything you can share about the road ahead?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to understand kind of the journey that many of our customers go through. And then when you take cloud in particular, they move maybe a handful of applications. They get familiar with what is needed in order to operationalize in the cloud. And then they start to move a bunch more and a bunch more. Maybe 5 becomes 100, 100 becomes a few hundred. And then before you kind of tip over to, hey, I'm operating dominantly in the cloud, there's quite a bit of like experience that they gain as a result of that. So we are kind of in that phase of the journey, helping customers kind of get from that 5 to a few hundred and have hygiene in how they operate their cloud networking and cloud infrastructure. Now, the story doesn't stop there because there's rapid evolution happening when the infrastructure. Cloud is not like one big fuzzy thing out there. Cloud is comprised of regions. Cloud is comprised of edges. Computers coming really close to the user, and so the problem actually gets quite complex quite quickly. And customers are once again back to the drawing board, thinking about how do I now start to grasp this? How do I operationalize my environment so that I can accommodate all of these things? Because these are all really good set of capabilities, but how do I accommodate that? And so what this ultimately kind of leads to is the focus has to be on who's the user and what is the application. The underlying network has, as much as I've spent 20 years kind of building and innovating in network, I know that the network is a means to an end. It is really helping you achieve what the user cares about or what an application cares about. And so we're using the power of data to elevate that conversation from capabilities to outcomes. And then from outcomes, we need to be able to get to essentially autonomous, which is kind of the journey that we are in. From autonomous, you have to be able to completely get to a self-reliant, self-sufficient, like, hey, just here's kind of what is in my brain, go make it happen, right? And so those are all the possibilities. Now, is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. There's a rapid kind of sea change that needs to happen both in the mindset of the person utilizing the platform and also what they want to achieve, right? And so we'll take baby steps to get there. But the goal is really to go from kind of autonomous to completely kind of transparent, right? Like I just care about, here are my users, here are my applications, hey, infrastructure, just go make it happen. And that's what we want to get to. We feel that will happen, whether Proceemo exists or not. I think that will happen. What we want to do is be the first ones to get you there.
Well, like I said a few moments ago, you've been on an incredible journey and you've shared your origin story. Now I'm going to have a little bit of fun with you and ask you, what has been the soundtrack to your journey and your startup story there? Is there a song or a piece of music that has inspired you along the way or just helps you get your head in the zone before going on stage or landing a big meeting? What would your song be and why? And we'll add your song choice to our Spotify playlist.
Oh, God. So if you look at my Spotify playlist, it actually is quite crazy in terms of, I like hip hop quite a bit. But the song that I kind of gravitate to before a big moment is really kind of Queen's We Are the Champion, right? Like, and there's a few phrases in there that gives me kind of goosepimples every single time, which is, irrespective of like what mistakes you make, don't forget that you really are like out there, putting yourself out there, and so you have to treat yourself as a champion, right? And so it gives you kind of a momentary boost, and then you go do what you have to do well, and then you let the decision there guide what you want to do after that, right? But this is one song probably kind of top of my playlist every single time.
What a great choice. And if it makes you feel better, everybody's Spotify playlist is a little bit crazy. I know, I think we're reaching that time of the year where Spotify let you rewind and show you all your best bits and everything you've listened to throughout the year. And you want it to be super cool, but it never is it? You know, when you...
Exactly. Yeah, actually that end of the year playlist sometimes catches me by surprise. I was like, what was I listening to this? Really? Why?
Yeah, I wasn't listening to Baby Shark in June.
Oh my God! Yeah, it took me a while to. Yeah, I have two young kids, 8 and 7. It took me a while to get that song out of my system.
Well, we better change the subject quickly, or we'll both be stuck with that earworm. So before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about the work you're doing, or maybe even reach out and contact your team, I know there are so many different domains out there now. What's the best way of finding Proceemo online?
Yeah, so go to proceemo.io/cloud networking. That's the single place that has quite a bit of information on what we do. Importantly, what do our customers do with this? What can you achieve? What are the use cases and so forth? So that will be the best starting point. And then the second one right after that is we again believe in you getting empowered. And so if you like what you see, there is a one-click trial that you can immediately launch and experience the platform for yourself. You don't need to talk to anybody. That's how I like to do shopping as well these days, or research these days. I don't like to talk to people unless I feel like I have some level of knowledge and competence. And so try the platform for yourself, see if it cuts it, and if it does, then there is a button right there that says contact us, and somebody from the Proceemo team will be happy to jump on a call and go through this. So those are kind of the starting points. So reach out to us or go to proceemo.io/cloud networking.
Excellent. Well, I'll add that link to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. There's so much, again, I've loved about chatting with you today, your story, the problems that you're solving. And I think what really stands out for me as well is, yes, it's your second startup journey, but also I think it's the very heart of the company and your extensive experience solving complex problems within IT infrastructure. And that time spent in the trenches as the IT guy is laid that path for what you're doing now. And as an ex-IT guy myself, I applaud that. I think everybody in an IT team has sat around and complained about things and why nothing gets any better, but you've got out there and turned that to an advantage and an opportunity and started fixing those problems. So thank you so much, though, for sharing that story with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Neil. And I love the questions and the kind of prodding as well. And you kept it both lively and technical. So thank you for doing that.
So powered by data insights and machine learning models, the Proceemo Application Experience Infrastructure Platform, better known as AXI, is enabling multi-cloud infrastructure strategies to deliver apps that are fast, secure and cost optimized. That's where we are right now. But what I loved about today's conversation is that the founders and team have extensive experience solving complex problems within the IT infrastructure. Essentially, it was inspired by their time in those IT trenches. But I'd love to hear your experiences, insights, and anything that you'd like to share. Equally, if you have any questions, send them over to techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So if you, your business, or anybody out there who needs any help with thought leadership blogs or starting your own podcast, again, give me a shout over at techblogwriter.co.uk. But that's it for today's episode, so a big thank you as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.